Roald Dahl because his stories are funny, and I like how long his books are, and they're really interesting.
I think he's very interesting, and I like the way he presented his books. Over 70 years old, and he comes from Norway.
I don't know much about Roald Dahl, but I know a lot about his books.
Well, he's a terrific writer. I really like his writing.
He's a great author because I've got most of his books.
I was really surprised because some people say he's really cantankerous, but he was really nice. He's not mean at all.
He makes lots of children happy.
Oh, he's a nice man. He's a great storyteller.
To come and see Roald Dahl was a good experience for me.
Imagine winning a tour of a chocolate factory and knowing that you can have all the chocolates and lollies and toffees that you can eat. Imagine a peach that grows bigger and bigger and bigger and takes you on the most wonderful adventures. Imagine adults that are nasty and cruel and horrible and mean as well as ugly. Imagine a medicine that can make you grow bigger and bigger and then shrink you down to a tiny, tiny size. And can you imagine the people that you least expect might really be witches? Roald Dahl has imagined all of these things and turned them into wonderful, real adventures that children all over the world are enjoying. Roald Dahl was born in Wales in 1916, and he started off by writing books for adults. After 15 years of that, in 1960, he wrote his first children's book, James and the Giant Peach. Roald Dahl went to boarding school in England from the age of 9, and he wasn't a particularly good student. In fact, he wasn't even very good at story writing. I was lucky enough to speak to Roald Dahl during his Australian tour. Have you got any clues or hints for children in classrooms if they're told they've got to write something for their teacher?
If they find it difficult, it's usually because they're not readers of books, and they haven't got a big enough vocabulary. The vocabulary comes with reading books. But I think the teacher will find that nearly all the ones who have difficulty in expressing themselves in an essay are the ones who are not much in the way of readers. It's the only way anyone learns how to write is to read other people who've done it before you. That's why it's essential that you read books.
I believe you've got a very special room where you write all your wonderful stories. Could you tell us about your writing room?
The best I can, yes. It's a little hut, a little brick hut painted white, about 12 feet by 10, up in our apple orchard, about 200 yards from the house. And it was built 35, 40 years ago for me for that purpose. And it's built of single brick. All houses are built with a cavity wall, you see, with a hole in the middle and a brick there and a brick or a breeze block there. This is just a single brick wall. The result is, it was wildly cold in the winter, because we have cold winters. And so I've lined the whole thing with inch-thick polystyrene. I've stuck them on, these sheets. And that's a wonderful insulator, you see. But they've been on there ever since the hut was built, more or less. And they're absolutely marvelous sort of ochre brown color, the whole thing, polystyrene, from my tobacco smoke, you see. And it's beautiful color. And the hut itself, I sit in an armchair, rather bigger than this one I'm in now, and leaning back a bit more. And attached to the legs of the chair by wire is a trunk, a leather trunk about that long and about that high and that wide. And it's over there. And it's filled with, I've filled it with thick blocks of wood to make it solid. And so I can put my feet against it and I can push, or I can lay them on it, or do it, but the feet are always up. So I'm in a sort of, the way you sit in a modern dentist chair, really, leaning back. And then across here, I pick up from there a roll of corrugated brown paper, which I've got to exactly the right thickness. And I lay it across the arm of the chair there, and it comes to probably about there. And then over that, I take from there my writing board, which I make. And it's a board about that size and that wide, and it's covered with green billiard cloth, which I iron on. And it's got a cutout here for the tummy. And so there you have this beautifully sloping board, which comes right into there. So you can put your elbow on it or anything. And you lean back, and it's the most comfortable position in the world. I mean, it's easily the most comfortable position I am ever in, unless I'm lying down in bed. And so, well, hell, if you're going to spend your working hours in one place, sedentary like that, you might as well get as comfortable as you can. I've never understood anyone wanting to sit bolt upright with the neck bent like this, looking down at a desk, and the legs down on the floor, which is very unhealthy anyway for circulation and everything else. And so I'm comfy. And on one side is a big table, much bigger than the one beside me here, an old pine table with all sorts of muck on it, and my 6 pencils and my sharpener, electric sharpener, and my thermos of coffee and a little thing. And on this side, my packet of gaspers and an ashtray and all that sort of thing. And I put a little rug over my knees as well, you see. It sort of settles you. And once I'm in it, I'm in a nest. I'm in a real cozy nest. And you don't get out, you can't just leap out. You have to sort of undo everything and take it off and get out. So you're imprisoned in this beautiful, comfortable nest where you sit down, you pick up, you don't have to move, pick up a pencil, put in the sharpener. I sharpen all 6 before I start, you see, and put them back. And the rubber is there and everything's there.
What's the process involved in writing a book? Do you think up all the children first and then put them into the book?
It all grows as you're sitting in this comfortable chair. You just start with a tiny germ of an idea. Really, it was chocolate. And an inventing room in a magical chocolate factory, and that's all you have. And then you sit there and you play around with it, and suddenly you get the idea, I don't know, that's sort of a bit of luck. You get the idea of having a lot of disgusting children, which children laugh at, you know. I got so excited by the disgusting children, I put in 18 of them in the beginning, and the whole thing was top-heavy. I had to rewrite it all. It all grows at the desk. The whole story, slowly, slowly, slowly.
So do you think up the children first and then write around them and pop them in?
You do think up one at a time, really. You never leave one page until it's finished. And you gradually advance with the story growing. And if you find you've gone the wrong direction and cocked it, you have to put it all aside and start again. Every book has a kind of balance. It was top-heavy and didn't work. The best balanced novel ever written is Madame Bovary by Flaubert. A well-balanced, tiny little children's book, on a different plane, of course, is Fantastic Mr. Fox. It's a much better balanced book than most of the others. Everything is just in the right place and not too long and not too short. And so you have to look at all that.
Your newest book is called Matilda. What's it about?
Well, it's a funny book because I've had a note in my little ideas book for about 20 years, as a lot of the notes, they're all old, saying try to do something with a child who can make things move with the eyes alone, which is always interesting. It's magic, really. And I've kept away from it for many years, seen it every year, bypassed it, and about 2 years ago I thought, well, I wonder if I could have a go with that. And so I walked around it and sniffed it and then started it. And it was very difficult because that's only a little part of the plot, really. And you have to build your characters and everything else. And the book finally went or developed into being a diatribe against uncaring parents who not only don't take enough notice of their children, but who don't care about their education and concentrate entirely on the television. There's nothing wrong with a bit of television, in my opinion. It can be very good, some of it. I think that there are a lot of things that children can see on television which are great fun, or educational either, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be great fun either. And so I'm not as against it as I was 25 years ago when I wrote Charlie and had a great harangue against it, and Mike TV, and go and throw your television set out the window and all that sort of thing. No, I've changed a lot since then because I've seen so much good on it. I mean, children learn an enormous amount, for example, about foreign countries and things. They're seeing them all the time. But I'm dead against any parent allowing a young child to come back from school about 3:30 or 4, go straight into the television, switch it on, and stay there until they go to bed. And a lot of them do that, you know. And that's not basically the child's fault, it's the parents who should stop it. And that's why in Matilda I've made the parents extremely awful people. They're exaggerated forms of a certain type of parent, really. And it is a great propaganda book, in a way, for reading books and how useful they are. If a child is going to become anything worthwhile later on in life, either one of the professions, doctor, architect, lawyer, journalist, there are millions of them, but they're professions as opposed to laboratory attendants or bricklayers. They have got to read books, because when you come to take your exams, your very early medical exams or legal exams or whatever they are, you've got to plow through and absorb tomes of stuff. Now, if you can get, it's like everything in life, if you can get a training to understand and handle books early in life, at the age of, say, 7, 8, and 9, it's an enormous advantage, because by the time you come to 15, 16, 17, you can pick up a book, read it, absorb it. A child who, all children when they're 6, 7, 8, or most children, are frightened of fairly thick books. They're daunting. And if you can manage to write a children's book that is so funny and exciting and absorbing that the child falls in love with it, it'll begin to say, that child, books are fun, books are easy. And so that's my only passion, is it doesn't matter what's in my books at all, really, and they're not basically propaganda or morality tales. It's simply teaching children in the first part of their lives not to be frightened of books. That's all.
Thank you, Roald. I'm sure that children and adults will continue to enjoy your books for many, many years to come. While Roald Dahl was in Melbourne, he gave a live performance at the Dallas Brooks Hall. He entertained his audience with stories about his life, with excerpts from his books, and he also answered questions from the children there. You can watch for Roald Dahl recorded live in Melbourne on TV Ed Australia.
I think he's very interesting, and I like the way he presented his books. Over 70 years old, and he comes from Norway.
I don't know much about Roald Dahl, but I know a lot about his books.
Well, he's a terrific writer. I really like his writing.
He's a great author because I've got most of his books.
I was really surprised because some people say he's really cantankerous, but he was really nice and he's not mean at all.
He makes lots of children happy.
Oh, he's a nice man. He's a great storyteller. To come and see Roald Dahl was a good experience for me.
Welcome to the wonderful world of Roald Dahl. This is one in a series of 4 programs recorded live at the Dallas Brooks Hall. We're sure that you'll enjoy watching and listening to Roald Dahl as much as you've enjoyed reading his books.
Well, this is a great occasion for me. to meet in the flesh. Anyway, some of all the Australian children who have been writing to me for so many years. I'm not sure it's quite as great an occasion for you to see me. I find it is, it's usually a disappointment for you to meet in the flesh a writer whose books you have enjoyed. I think it's better by far to keep him in your imaginations as a kind of shadowy, half-human figure with a red beard and a green cloak and magic in his fingers. Instead of that, you see before you an old twit with a bald head who is totally human and really very ordinary indeed. So where, you obviously ask yourselves, do the stories come from? That is always a mystery. The way a writer speaks, or how he looks, or what he says, has absolutely nothing to do with what he writes. The mystery is inside the head. There are things in there that only come out when you are alone in your little hut and the curtains are drawn and everything is very quiet and your mind drifts away into a place where nothing is real and everything is made up. And if you write those things down, it is called fantasy. And that's what I have tried to do now for many years. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go on burbling to you like this, so I've thought of something that we have to do, which is to, you see, if I put my mouth closer to this thing, it gets too loud, doesn't it? I've picked out tiny little bits from a bunch of books, most of which I think you probably know, and I will try very briefly to tell you how they came to be written. Or maybe I'll ask you something first. You see, this thing here is a very secret book. I've had it beside me in my hut for about 40 years. Certainly ever since and before I started writing children's books, when I was writing grown-up books. And what it's for, mainly, it's an old school exercise book, I think, all held together now with bits of sellotape. What it's for really is that if you get a tiny little idea that shoots into your head, you very quickly write it down in one line in here. Because an idea, or a good idea, or even a tiny germ of an idea, is like a dream. And if you don't, you know that, if you don't write a dream down the moment you wake up, by the time you're having breakfast, you've forgotten it. And it's just the same with little ideas. And so, this is full of them. And lots of them are rotten, and some I've used. And what I do, if I'm going to try to start to write a new children's book, is I thumb through this old book and look at all these tiny little lines, one-liners of ideas, and wonder whether I could start something and build a book around that. And so, here, and I've put bits of paper in to tell me where we are, you see. Now here, I have one which says, do something against beards. Now, what book would that be? You don't know, do you? My wife said, who's sitting over there, she said, if you do it this way round, you'll get them all shouting and get them to join in with you. But you all are totally tongue-tied, I can see. So I'll just go on with it. Anyone know what a book, if I got a little note here and I have to start to try and write a book against beards, what book would that be? Hooray! 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 We've got it. So, a tiny little bit from it. Hey, my spaghetti's moving, cried Mr. Twit, poking around in it with his fork. It's a new kind, Mrs. Twit said, taking a mouthful from her own plate, which of course had no worms. It's called squiggly spaghetti. It's delicious. Eat it up while it's nice and hot. Mr. Twit started eating, twisting the long tomato-covered strings around his fork and shoveling them into his mouth. Soon there was tomato sauce all over his hairy chin. It's not as good as the ordinary kind, he said, talking with his mouth full. It's too squishy. I find it very tasty, Mrs. Twit said. She was watching him from the other end of the table. It gave her great pleasure to watch him eating worms. I find it rather bitter, Mr. Twit said. It's got a distinctly bitter flavor. Buy the other kind next time. Mrs. Twit waited until Mr. Twit had eaten the whole plateful. Then she said, "You want to know why your spaghetti was squishy?" Why, he said. And why it had a nasty, bitter taste? Why, he said. Because it was worms, cried Mrs. Twit, clapping her hands and stamping her feet and rocking with horrible laughter. Now, you see, I find those things funny. Most grown-ups don't. But there we are. That's where we're different. Now, I've got an interesting note here, which has been in this book for a good 20 years. And I saw it every year, and I never touched it. I was frightened of it. And it says, try to do something with a child who can move objects with her eyes alone. Now, yes, not all of you will know the answer to that one because it's still an expensive hardcover book. But it comes out next October with Puffin, and it'll be cheaper and easier to get. But I'm as much as one can be, I'm moderately proud of this book. I think it may be about the best so far. And that's nice to think when you can write a halfway decent book when you're in your 71st year. You're usually under the sod by then. This clot, boomed the headmistress, pointing her the riding crop at him like a rapier. This blackhead, this foul carbuncle, this poisonous pustule that you see before you is none other than a disgusting criminal, a denizen of the underworld, a member of the mafia. Those of you who haven't read this book, this is the headmistress of the school talking to little children. Who, me? Bruce Bogtrotter said, looking genuinely puzzled. He's up on the platform now with the headmistress, and the whole school's down there. A thief, the Trunchbull screamed. A crook, a pirate, a brigand, a rustler. Steady on, the boy said. I mean, dash it all, headmistress. Do you deny it, you miserable little gumboil? Do you plead not guilty? I don't know what you're talking about, the boy said, more puzzled than ever. I'll tell you what I'm talking about, you suppurating little blister, the Trunchbull shouted. Yesterday morning, during break, you sneaked like a serpent into the kitchen and stole a slice of my private chocolate cake from my tea tray. That tray had just been prepared for me personally by the cook. It was my morning snack. And as for the cake, it was my own private stock. That was not boy's cake. You don't think for 1 minute I'm going to give you the filth, give you to eat the filth that I eat, the other way around. That was not boy's cake. You don't think for 1 minute I'm going to eat the filth I give you. That cake was made from real butter and real cream, and he, that robber bandit, that safecracker, that highwayman standing over there with his socks around his ankles, stole it and ate it. I never did, the boy exclaimed, turning from grey to white. Don't lie to me, Bogtrotter, barked the Trunchbull. The cook saw you. What's more, she saw you eating it. The Trunchbull paused to wipe a fleck of froth from her lips. Now we will jump, and we'll meet the headmistress again in front of a form
which Matilda's just joined. They're little 5-year-olds, and it's their first term at school. And once a week, the headmistress goes in to test them, to see that the nice teacher, Miss Honey, is teaching them properly. So here she is, testing them. Spell what, you idiot? Spell the word what. W-O-T, Eric said, answering too quickly. There was a nasty silence. I'll give you one more chance, the Trunchbull said, not moving. Oh, yes, I know, Eric said. It's got an H in it. W-H-O-T, it's easy. In 2 large strides, the Trunchbull was behind Eric's desk. And there she stood, a pillar of doom towering over the helpless boy. Eric glanced fearfully back over his shoulder at the monster. I was right, wasn't I? He murmured nervously. You were wrong, the Trunchbull barked. In fact, you strike me as the sort of poisonous little pockmark that will always be wrong. You sit wrong, you look wrong, you speak wrong. Chance to be right. Eric hesitated. Then he said very slowly, it's not W-O-T, and it's not W-H-O-T. Oh, I know. It must be W-H-O-T-T. Standing behind Eric, the Trunchbull reached out and took hold of the boy's 2 ears, one with each hand, pinching them between forefinger and thumb. Ow, Eric cried. Oh, you're hurting me. I haven't started yet, the Trunchbull said briskly. And now, taking a firm grip on his 2 ears, she lifted him bodily out of his seat and held him aloft. Like Rupert before him, Eric squealed the house down. From the back of the classroom, Miss Honey cried out, Miss Trunchbull, don't, please let him go, his ears might come off. They'll never come off, the Trunchbull shouted back. I have discovered through long experience, Miss Honey, that the ears of small boys are stuck very firmly to their heads. So that's a bit from the Twits. Now here's a sort of here's a sort of joker in the pack. So I'm not going to look in my book for the moment. It's called The Dentist and the Crocodile. The crocodile, with cunning smile, sat in the dentist's chair. He said, right here and everywhere, my teeth require repair. The dentist's face was turning white. He quivered, quaked, and shook. He muttered, I suppose I'm going to have to take a look. I want you, Crocodile declared, to do the back ones first. The molars at the very back are easily the worst. He opened wide his massive jaws. It was a fearsome sight. At least 300 pointed teeth, all sharp and shining white. The dentist kept himself well clear. He stood 2 yards away. He chose the longest probe he had to search out the decay. I said to do the back ones first, the crocodile called out. You're much too far away, dear sir, to see what you're about. To do the back ones properly, you've got to put your head deep down inside my great big mouth, the grinning crocky said. The poor old dentist wrung his hands, and weeping in despair, he cried, no, no, I see them all extremely well from here. Just then, in burst a lady, in her hands a golden chain. She cried, oh, Croc, you naughty boy, you're playing tricks again. Watch out, the dentist shrieked and started climbing up the wall. He's after me, he's after you, he's going to eat us all. Don't be a twit, the lady said, and flashed a gorgeous smile. He's harmless, he's my little pet, my lovely crocodile. There we are. Now, that's one of a whole bunch of rhymes which are in a new nasty rhyme book that I've done. I did it actually when I was writing Matilda, because I wrote the whole of Matilda and I got the whole of the last half wrong. Anyone could see that, and I got so depressed about it, and I couldn't bear to sit down for 6 months right away and do it again. Anyway, I don't think I could have done. So I amused myself by doing some more revolting rhymes. And by the time I'd done them, some of them got a bit more fruity than they were meant to be. And when they, when they went to my publisher, he said, you can't have this as a children's book. I said, why not? They're all dirty little beasts anyway. They're fully corrupted. He said, no, no, you can't. We'll have some of the more elderly librarians after us. I said, well, to hell with the elderly librarians. And he said, no, the name of our good publishing house is at stake. So I'm afraid it'll be published as an adult book, but we'll have across the front, danger, keep away from children. So you'll all go and get it, you see, and get even more corrupted than you were before. Some of them I'm not able to read you out, I must admit, because some of you have parents and teachers here, and I don't want to be scragged up here on the stage. But I'll risk one or two not very fruity ones. Like, my mother said, there are no joys in ever kissing silly boys. Just one small kiss and one small squeeze can land you with some foul disease. But, Mum, you mean from just a kiss? You know quite well my meaning, miss. Last week, when coming home from school, I clean forgot Mum's golden rule. I let Jim Young, that handsome louse, steal one small kiss behind our house. Oh, woe is me, I've paid the price. I should have listened to advice. My mum was right 100-fold. I've caught Jim's horrid runny cold. There we are. Then you see, hold on. While I was doing these, there was a great drive going on in England over the whole country to raise money for one of the greatest children's hospitals in the world, which is called Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. And the whole country was rallying round. They needed £36 million for some tremendous renovation and to keep going. And everyone was doing something. And my wife, Lissy, said to me at lunch one day, she said, why don't you and Quentin Blake do a Christmas card and sell it for Great Ormond Street? And I said, well, what a jolly good idea. And I called Quentin, and he said, of course. He said, you write the little rhyme, and I'll draw the picture. And so I wrote the little rhyme, and Quentin drew the most marvelous picture of a female Father Christmas with all the red stuff all over her, pirouetting on her toes. And the rhyme went like this. Where art thou, Mother Christmas? I only wish I knew why Father should get all the praise and no one mentions you. I'll bet you buy the presents and wrap them large and small, and all the time that dirty swine pretends he's done it all. So hail to Mother Christmas, the uncomplaining slave, and down with Father Christmas, that something knave. And of course, you see, it is a rather cunning card, because I knew that the mothers do all the shopping anyway, and they buy all the Christmas cards, and so they loved it. And then I went to Penguin and Puffin in London, who buy an enormous amount of paper and print and everything else from people, and they twisted a few arms, and we got everything absolutely free. And the card came out, and it made lots of money for the hospital. And I believe that Penguin and Puffin here might do it for Australia next year for some children's hospital, you see. But that was all because of, you mustn't only listen to your own advice, that was all because of my wife, Lissy. And she's sitting over there. If you want to see her, you've only got to look around and see who the best-looking girl in the room is, and you'll see her. Ha ha, yes, where is she? Now, where are we? Oh, that new little book of rhymes, it's called Rhyme Stew, because it has such a mixture of silly things in it. All the famous old nursery rhymes, they're called. Like, as I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 40 wives. He said, I think it's much more fun than simply having only one. So that's the end of that one. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? I live with my brat in a high-rise flat, so how in the hell would I know? All right. Hey, hey diddle diddle, we're all on the fiddle. We never get up until noon. We only take cash, which we carefully stash, and we work by the light of the moon. I had a little nut tree. Nothing would it bear. I searched in all its branches, weren't any there. Oh, little tree, I begged, give me just a few. The little tree looked down at me and murmured, nuts to you. So that's the end of that.